off. I am Rachel. I am a volunteer with the Collab Lab. I've also been a participant in the Collab Lab, both the regular and the advanced project. For those of you who don't know about the Collab Lab is a nonprofit that was established to give practical experience to newer engineers by working remotely on real world projects with other early career developers, and it's with like pull requests, demos, retrospectives, and mentorship. And then another part of the Collab Lab is we give technical talks, which are now once a month. And as you can see on this page, all the talks are recorded and posted to YouTube. Links to those recordings we'll put on the original meetup page. Live captioning is available using Zoom's closed caption feature. I think if you go to the More button and you go show subtitle, then the captions can show. Please read our code of conduct. If this is your first time with the Collab Lab, there's a link there. And then, as I mentioned before, Collab Lab is completely run on volunteer. It's a nonprofit, so consider sponsoring us at the link. And then tonight's talk is going to be configuring your career as a beginner and engineer with Wellington Johnson. Wellington Johnson is an Atlanta-based engineer who works for a Brooklyn-based financial startup called TeamShares. He's been working with backend systems and in technology for the past 4 years in data analytics, software engineering, test engineering, and he is here to share his experience. So without further ado, here is Wellington, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Hey everyone, super grateful to be here, and thank you to Rachel and Collab Lab for letting me do this talk. This is my first talk, so please go easy on me. But I'm super excited to hopefully impart some of the things that I've gone through in the past 4 years that I've been in the tech industry, some of the pitfalls that I've fallen into, and hopefully some of the lessons that I've learned will transfer over and be practical for you to take along on your journey. So let me share my screen here. Sweet, can everyone see my screen? Cool. All righty. Okay, so a little bit about me. I know this is a wall of text, but I'll go through this quickly, I promise. Together, I've been 4 years in tech, about 3 years working professionally. The first year I was doing a lot of, self-learning, self-teaching, working through, independent projects and things like that. Through that 1 year span, I actually had technically been freelancing for the latter end of that for the last 2 months, and that was a great experience. Obviously, those were pretty low level projects, pretty base level sort of web development, but it was a lot of fun, super helpful, and it helped me learn a lot. My 3 years working professionally started in 2017, 2018. So I've worked on big enterprise teams at a supply chain technology consulting firm with about 15 or so engineers. And that was a good experience, but I've also worked for small startup teams. Like, for example, the team that I'm on now, my team that I'm working on only has 6 engineers currently. I'm not necessarily sure. We were doing a hiring frenzy, but we stopped for a little bit because I think we're at a good place to where we're, working on scaling up and really kind of putting work into the product. And I'm also the author of the Beginning Software Engineers Playbook, Mental Frameworks and Advice for the Hard Things at Work and Beyond. So this presentation is going to be a lot from that book, but what it's also going to include is also a lot of practical things that I've experienced personally, right? So the book is a lot of like high level general knowledge, but this presentation is going to be that high level knowledge with some practical experience and memories from my 4 years at work, right? So a little bit of personal, I guess, like a personal thing about me is that I love writing, exercising, reading, hiking, and coding. That's when I'm like my happiest. I love exercising. I love reading and writing, and coding. The time just literally passes by when I'm coding. I will sit in my room in the dark for what I think is an hour. My girlfriend calls me and says, "Where have you been?" And it's been like 5 hours. And my Twitter's down below in case you want to follow me. I'm not that interesting, I promise, but in case you want to follow me, my Twitter's down there. Okay, let's get right into it. So the agenda for today, I'll be covering four main topics. So confronting a giant code base, communication with your team, so external communication, communicating internally, so communication with yourself, how you speak with yourself, all that good stuff. And finally, dealing with adversity and imposter syndrome, because I feel like that's a big topic that, that's something that you run into, right? But I feel like you can better equip yourself for it. So when you do run into it, you'll be better prepared for it. So I think I can provide, some good things to kind of, deal with it, identify it, and then deal with it in a very effective way. So confronting a giant code base. So I know that, for engineers who haven't gotten their first job, or for engineers who are beginning to get their first job, I know that it's probably something that's in the back of your mind in terms of, well, when I get onto a big team, obviously the code base already exists. It's already kind of doing its own thing. How am I going to fit in that, right? How do I, kind of examine myself against, everything that's going on with the company already? How do I literally jump onto a moving train, right? Because that's kind of what it is, jumping onto a moving train. So when you get settled into a new job, looking at all those files and folders can be intimidating, but it doesn't have to be, right? We're going to go over 4 things that I think are super, super important when you're confronting a giant code base. So the first is going to be understanding the stack at a high level. The second is going to be understanding critical data flows. So how does data move within your code base? I think that's super, super important, and something that doesn't necessarily get understood at a general level. It's more so piecemeal as you start to work on tickets, right? But I think understanding how data flows more generally at the start will set you up better for when you start to tackle tickets and tackle problems. The third is going to be explore user interactions and application endpoints. And the fourth is going to be getting to know third-party APIs. So understanding the stack at a high level. What does that mean? So in terms of understanding the code base at a high level, it's basically breaking down what the architecture is from the standpoint of what tools are being used. So whether you use AWS or Azure, or whether you use Stripe, or whether you use PayPal, or what type of APIs you're going to be using, it's really, really important to understand what all of the moving pieces, or what most of the moving pieces are in a code base, and how those third-party APIs connect to the code base. So a lot of the advantages that understanding the stack at a high level provides is you get more confidence when you go into bigger tasks, right? You get to understand a lot about systems design, and systems design is something that is not necessarily required for a more junior engineer. It's more so something that's going to be really, really important when you get to those more senior levels. But understanding how systems work in a code base is going to be really, really important for your development over the long term, because at that point, when you get to those, 2, 3, 4 years, or however long it takes for you to, understand things and get to a level like, oh yeah, I'm going to be in line to become a senior engineer, those questions are going to get asked of you, right? How would you design Netflix? How would you design Facebook? How would you design Uber? How would you design this, that, or the other? And systems design is a really, really important, it's literally the foundation for understanding how to build these massive, massive apps, right? And not even just those massive apps, but even like a single part of it. So like, for example, building the messaging component of Facebook, or how would you construct the comment system in in Facebook or the booking system in Airbnb, right? All of those are systems that work within the app. And systems design is the discipline that underpins all of those. So understanding a code base at a high level is really going to kind of get a really good introduction into systems design, and you'll be way more confident tackling tasks. Understanding critical data flows. So this was something that I didn't necessarily realize at my first job, but was kind of explained to me by our engineering manager, and how they looked at a piece of software, not knowing anything about it, right? How they understood it conceptually was that software is a factory that works on data in various ways. So you get an input, it goes through the app, you get an output, right? You get some sort of output, you get some sort of feedback, whether you click on something, enter in some information, or you go through a whole workflow, right? It has to be understood that software is a factor that works on data in various ways. So following the pipeline for a single resource is the best way to get an introduction to really understanding how data flows. So I'll give you an example, right? A login system for an application. You can log in and get authorized and authenticated various ways. There's so many APIs out there for authentication, authorization, etc. It's a really, really good idea to understand how a user is authenticated and authorized in your application. That is one of the most important resources for an application if it's user-based, right? Obviously, if there is a payment system, right, in your application, it's really, really important to understand, okay, well, if a user puts in a credit card, what happens to their information, right? If it goes through Stripe, okay, it goes through Stripe, but what happens after that? Is there any other logic on our side, on the team side, that works on that information, and what does that logic look like, and what pieces are being used within the code base that work on that piece of data, right? So it's really easy to kind of see and kind of break up into pieces what are the really, really big resources that exist within an application, and how it goes from point A to point B. So understanding that pipeline and then understanding the end state of that data is going to be super, super helpful in breaking down a code base easily. So the last one is going to be, or the last one of this section is going to be exploring user interactions and application endpoints. I've just been recently kind of like learning this, because in my previous job, I wasn't working on an application that was very user facing. I was working on a lot of tooling. I was working on a lot of like developer tooling stuff. So it wasn't necessarily hard for me to put myself in the user's shoes, right? Because the user was literally my colleague right next to me, right? But if you're working on a user-facing application, right, it's going to be, in my opinion, much harder to put yourself in the user's shoes. But it's really, really important to do that, because that enables you to really explore the code base in a different way, rather than like a technical perspective. It helps you explore from a more general perspective, and in a way where you think about not only the logic, but you also try to understand the user experience. So you may not necessarily find a bug in the back end doing this, but you might find a bug in terms of like the UI. Maybe something's not working correctly the way that it should. Maybe something feels like uneasy about the way that you enter in information and you transition from one page to another. It's really, really important to understand that a user's experience is just as important as the developer's experience, if not more important. And how you look at those user interactions needs to be more, what's the word? You need to have more scrutiny when you're looking at those sorts of things, because it presents opportunities. Like when you obviously report a bug, your engineering manager or the person that you report to might say, hey, you found this bug, you go tackle it, right? So these are opportunities that you can create for yourself when you're looking for things, when you're looking for bugs, or when you're looking for something that just doesn't seem right. befriending the inspector and debugger. So I was definitely afraid of the JavaScript debugger when I was starting out. I didn't know what continue was. I didn't know how to step over things. I didn't know what any of that was. And I had a really hard time, you know, not necessarily getting into the proper way of debugging, but getting into a more technical, nuanced way of debugging, because I'm sure you all are familiar with console logging everything, right? Like making sure you get to the right line. You say console log, this works, or console.log, this works, or whatever, right? And that's fine. That works, I think, 80 to 90% of the time, right? But sometimes when you're deep into code, when there are multiple APIs being called, when you are 4 to 5 files deep in a code base, when you're 4 to 5 files deep into a code base, it gets super, super hard to console log everything. And it gets super hard to keep track of stuff. So getting really into the JavaScript debugger, or whatever debugger you're going to use. I'm just going to use JavaScript because obviously that's a really popular language. Getting friendly with the debugger is super, super important. And it's going to help you a lot in when you because you are going to run into a bug where you think it's going to take a day, but it ends up taking a week, right? The debugger will cut down on at least 30% of that time. I'm telling you this now because this has happened to me before, right? I will be console logging things, but then my, I'll be pairing with a more senior engineer, and they'll be like, why don't you just use the debugger? And then I'm just kind of stuck there where I'm just like, well, I don't really know how to use it. And then, you kind of go through the process of like, okay, well, I guess I got to use it now, right? So to save you time, definitely befriend the debugger. Take as much time as you need to learn it, get intimate with it, understand it, and it will save you so much time. And you can still use console.log, I promise, but the debugger is so good. It's so good. Disproving any assumptions about the app. So this one's a little bit abstract, but what I learned from this was that whenever you're interacting with an application, it's really easy to have assumptions about how the user is using something, right? And this goes back to user empathy. It's really easy to assume that a user is going to do something with the app, and they're going to follow the instructions of how you coded it on the back end or the front end or whatever, right? But they won't. Like half of the time, they won't. Half of the time, they will enter in some random information. Half the time, they will go back when you don't expect them to go back. They will close the window when you don't expect them to close the window. They will do some wild things, right? And so whenever you are interacting with an application, it's really, really important to try to assume what you think the user is going to do in the most, I would say, like, non-knowledgeable way about tech, if that makes sense. So like if they haven't used a computer before in their life, or if they've never used the internet, right? And they look at a screen and they look at a box and they assume that, oh, you can type something in because they've used the keyboard before. But thinking about it from a perspective where you're not necessarily so knowledgeable about the app, right? And I know it's super hard to do that, but I have run into some bugs where a user will enter in like a number or something like that, and it crashes the whole entire app, right? And that's not necessarily on the user, that's more so on the lack of validation that we had, right? That's more so on the lack of, checking for the existence of numbers or checking for the lack of numbers or whatever it may be. So it's really important to disprove any assumptions that you have about the app, whether you worked on it or not. So getting to know third-party APIs. This is something that hopefully when you get into your first job, or if you are in your first job, there is documentation on this. Personally, in my first job, there was no documentation on this. We literally did not have like any sort of list in terms of like what third-party APIs we used. The response that I got was like, well, we have a package.json file, so you can like look in that. And I was just like, are you serious? Like you can't just look at a package.json file and immediately parse out, what third-party APIs are important or not, because that's not how this goes, right? So it's really important to understand, you know, what third-party APIs are being used, and when you use them, right? So if you're using PayPal, if you're using Stripe, like how much of Stripe are you using, right? Obviously, you're not going to be using all of Stripe in your app, right? You're going to be using parts of it. So really get a good understanding of like the parts that you're using about the API, list them down, and then try to get a good feel about what that flow is like. So going back to understanding critical data flows, right? This goes like hand in hand with getting to know third-party APIs. Honestly, it's like trying to understand like how your app interacts with third-party APIs and how that data flows to the third-party API and then goes back to your application. Because that's all it is with an application, is like the data goes from your app to the API and then it bumps it back to your app to the API and then it bumps it back. So understanding that path and understanding what goes on in that path is super, super important. The other thing that's really cool about getting to know a lot of these third-party APIs is that when you have a good enough understanding of your application and when you have a good enough understanding of the roadmap for the application, you kind of get to this point where you can kind of like see a little bit of the future, right? So you can understand like, oh, we're using one-time payments right now, but we're planning to do subscriptions in the future. So let me go try to understand Stripe's API for subscriptions. Then at that point, you're going to be able to, obviously, if you're in a more junior position, you're not going to get, a whole entire feature dumped on you alone, right? But if you're working with a more senior engineer, you'll be able to get in on that future, right? You'll be able to get experience writing technical design docs. You'll be able to get experience building a feature from the ground up. You'll be able to get experience conversing with different stakeholders when it comes to understanding requirements about what needs to be done for specific subscriptions. And all of that, like I've said before with systems design, is a really, really important step from becoming, a software engineer 1 to going to that senior engineer role. A lot of it is design systems. A lot of it is understanding things from a high level and a low level. So that's super, super important, is understanding the scope of each API, taking inventory of what you see used within the app, and then looking for future opportunities to integrate new endpoints. So second point is communication. So the internal and external communication parts I wanted to combine into one, because I feel like it, there's that umbrella of communication, right? And communication is another one of those things where you'll develop as an engineer. And I know that, engineers have this stigma, or I guess it's kind of from the outside looking in. I personally worked with a lot of engineers who have great communication, right? But outside looking in, they'll just see somebody who works on computers and true. Engineers come from so many different backgrounds and so many different places and from so many different other professions, right? Where they were amazing at communication. And that directly translates to just getting better from a technical standpoint when you do get into software engineering. So we're going to cover one of my favorite sayings of all time, and I'm going to try not to mess this up. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Don't ask me to say that 5 times fast. I will not do that. The second part we're going to cover is external communication. And the third part we're going to cover is internal communication. So proper preparation prevents poor performance. Got that a little bit faster that time. This is, well, I'll tell you where I got this from, actually. So I got this from a Kendrick Lamar album. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Kendrick Lamar, but I got this from a Kendrick Lamar album, and that it's been one of my favorite sayings of all time for the past however long I've been listening to Kendrick Lamar, which has been like years. But this is super, super, super important for when you're just starting out as an engineer. Preparing your thoughts beforehand before you express yourself is really important, in that you'll be able to not only get your point across clearly, but you're going to be able to basically build a reputation for yourself, right? Being a good engineer and being a good communicator, that is like the GOAT combination. That is an amazing combination, right? So the three things that I've used to become a really, really good communicator and like preparing to get my thoughts out effectively. The first one is breaking your thoughts down into bite-sized components. So this works really well when you're trying to explain a problem that you're dealing with. In my book that I wrote, I have this thing called a problem and solution statement, and it's a two-part thing. So the first part of the problem solution statement is the problem. So I say, hey, this is a problem that I'm dealing with. Break it down. Try to communicate as best as you can the path that you took in order to like encounter that problem. So how did you run into that bug? Like what steps did you take to run into that bug? Make sure it's reproducible. So when you like share your screen and you reproduce the error, it follows along perfectly, right? The solution statement would be, I've worked on this for like an hour. Like I've time boxed myself for an hour. Can you help me with this? Or can we pair on this? Or can we talk about this in stand up? A lot of those statements work really well because the engineer that you want to speak with or you want to collab with, they know what the issue is, they know what the problem is, they know where it's located, they know beforehand about how much time they'll be able to give to you as well, because they'll be able to know like, oh, it touches like this scary part of the code base where we don't have a lot of error handling and we don't have a lot of like really good testing, or like, oh yeah, this part of the code base, this is the happy place, this is where we want to be, so I can give you like 5-10 minutes, we'll be able to get this cleared up easily, right? So you're actually doing your more senior colleague a favor by giving them as much context as possible beforehand, and you're able to better schedule your time, because it really helps to be able to not feel so like, I guess, kind of sinking whenever you can't get help, when you're scrambling for an engineer to help you with something or to give you advice on something, right? So it's really important to break your thoughts down into bite-sized components. Playing inner devil's advocate. So whenever you are working on an issue, right, try to understand, if you do have a solution in mind, try to think in probabilistic terms and not necessarily binary terms. So I'll explain what that means. So binary terms means, oh, the solution works or it doesn't work. So instead of thinking that way, think in probabilistic terms. Does this solution work, and how well is it going to work for the long term, right? Like if I implement this solution, what are the chances that this solution is going to be robust enough to where when a user goes through that same path, it's not going to mess up because of some edge case, right? Because when you start to think probabilistically, you start to think about edge cases. And thinking about edge cases is a really, really big sign of an engineer progressing and improving, right? Usually we think about the happy path, and then we think about kind of like one step that deviates in terms of like, oh, what happens if a user enters a number into what's supposed to only be alphabet characters, right? But then there can also be other edge cases, like, well, what if they enter in a symbol, or what if they enter in something blank? Like what happens in all of those different situations, right? So it's really, really good to think probabilistically and in multiple different ways, rather than just, does the solution like work? Like I've solved it, it works, I'm good to go. Or it doesn't solve it, I need to work harder, I need to solve this until it works, right? So I think it's really good to play inner devil's advocate and really kind of put your solution to the test before you put up that PR. And I'm not saying spend like 3 days kind of like putting your solution through the ringer, right? Take an extra hour to really think about, I've got the solution. Okay, let me put another 45 minutes to an hour to really think about, does this cover all my bases? And you'll save yourself a lot of time, because sometimes, you'll get a PR comment back saying, well, did you think about this? And it's like, oh man, like, no, I didn't think about that, because I only took like 20 seconds after I got super happy that I solved it, and I just pushed the PR up and I'm good to go, right? It's like, no, you got to think about it a little bit more. Notes, notes, notes. So always take notes during critical conversations. Duh, of course you would. But sometimes people don't. Like in stand-up, sometimes you don't take notes because sometimes it is just like a casual conversation between coworkers, but then you randomly get into a serious conversation because one of your coworkers brought up like, oh, I was dealing with this situation. And then another coworker's like, oh, I've dealt with that similar situation as well. And they start getting into more technical topics while still being casual. Of course, you don't have to like pull out your notebook or pull up Notion or whatever and start typing, but it's really good to think about that every now and then, because sometimes you are going to touch on the same parts of the code base, right? Sometimes you are going to run into the same issue or some issue just like it, right? And obviously, if you don't want to write notes, you obviously don't have to. Sometimes I don't write notes. Sometimes I'm just too tired at the end of the day to even open up Notion and want to type anything down. Like I've been typing all day. I don't want to type anymore, right? But this is just a light suggestion in terms of, taking better notes and being a little bit more cognizant of like conversations that do happen between colleagues where you can just like pick up little gems of information and just kind of like, note them down. It doesn't have to be, a full essay. It can be like, kind of 3 or 4 words just to kind of remind you of like, oh, it would be good if I like also looked into this, or it would be good if I also looked into that. So external communication. So how you speak to and with your coworkers, right? This is, I feel like in terms of areas to improve on, this is like the second most important, with the first most important obviously being technical understanding, right? Being a better coder, external communication is so important. Tailoring your words to your audience is probably, I'd say it's a lost art, because I think the more technical we get, the more we start understanding things, the better we start understanding things from a technical perspective, the more we tend to get more technical in our words that we use. And I feel like the less that we kind of like think about the audience that we're talking to. So I'll give you an example. For instance, one of my coworkers who works more on the founders team in terms of like organizing internal external communication between the founders and our customers. She is going to now be in charge of one of our front facing, like user facing websites, right? And I'm in charge of, I guess I would say, the back end of that, right? So making sure, its uptime is great, making sure any of the APIs that it interacts with is fine. Just keeping an eye on it, right? So that responsibility got transferred to her just recently. So last week I was on call as the engineer, and usually our notifications stay pretty quiet. But because of my luck, last week it went pretty wild. I was literally getting notifications pretty much all day and just having to put out fires. But I appreciate that, because I look at all challenges as a good thing. But anyways, there was a issue that I ran into that was directly related to this presence page that she was now in charge of. And so I came up with a solution. I came up with a temporary solution to stop it from crashing. And then I came up with a more long-term solution. But the issue was that it was a super technical one. It dealt with webhooks, and it dealt with API keys, and it dealt with things that people outside of software engineering aren't really familiar with, right? So obviously my first instance was to get on a Zoom with her and explain to her everything top down, like the error that I ran into and all that stuff. But I was like, wait a minute. Miranda's not a software engineer, right? Like, she's great at her job, but obviously she doesn't understand, like, from my perspective, what's going on. So I need to explain to her in a way where it's more so from a high level rather than a low level. So I went back, I typed out literally everything that happened, my solution, and then I translated it into a more like general way of communicating with an external stakeholder. I like to call everyone that's outside of the software engineering team external stakeholders, because they're still part of the team. They're part of the product. They're just as important as we are, but they are external as in outside of the software engineering team, right? So I literally created a one-for-one kind of like copy that, used metaphors and analogies, but got the point across in a way where she understood and was like, yeah, let's do this. This sounds like a good idea. Anything else that I need to be aware of? I was like, no, I think this is a good idea. There are no downsides from what I can see, right? As software engineers, we can only see is so far. But if something goes wrong, something goes wrong. We got to fix it. That's our job. But I was able to connect to her in a way where she was able to understand what I wanted to do. And I was able to, I didn't have to waste any time kind of like explaining things over and over again, because I took the time on the front end to translate my really, really technical explanation into a more high level general explanation. I think that's really important, even for some people inside of software engineering, right? So if you're working with somebody who doesn't necessarily know how an API works, right? You're not going to go immediately into the API and the code and explain kind of what's going on. You're going to first say, hey, this is how, and I keep using Stripe, but Stripe's a great example. This is how Stripe's API works at a high level. These are how payments work, just from a user perspective. Okay, here's how we're going to get into the technical part of it, right? So like there's levels to it that I feel like is a really good way of improving your communication skills. Always have alternative explanations ready. So going back to that last comment I just made, making sure that you have a technical explanation and then a corresponding general explanation is super, super important, because you never know when you're going to have to explain how and why you solve something to someone who has no idea about the code base at a deeper level. So having that general explanation on hand is like super, super helpful, because you don't have to pull your hair out in the middle of the conversation having to like directly translate things, kind of like in like impromptu, translations, right? It's super, super frustrating, and it puts you on the spot. And, oftentimes you can't really, explain it as well as if you did the front end work to translate it over. And make the technical practical. Please, please, please try to use more general language, regardless of the audience. I think that's really important. And I probably sound like a scratch record now at this point, but definitely try to make things more general when you're trying to communicate with anyone. So internal communication. This is something, admittedly, I'm still trying to work on as well. Talking to yourself and trying to encourage yourself, especially when the going gets hard, right? Especially when you start making mistakes, you have like a streak of mistakes and you just feel terrible and horrible and everything's going wrong and nothing can get merged, and your merge conflicts are like pages long and everything is just like terrible, right? Talk to yourself. Let yourself know that everybody makes mistakes. Like, you're not the only one screwing up today. You're not the only one that took a swing at an issue and missed today, right? In stand-up, somebody's probably going to be like, yeah, I'm still working on this, or yeah, I went down this path, but it was completely fruitless, so I'm going to have to start all over again. Everyone has those days, whether you are a junior software engineer or a staff engineer or an engineering manager or a VP of tech. Like, everyone has those issues, right? Nobody is immune to making those mistakes. And it's super, super important to understand that it's just another learning opportunity. Like, all of these mistakes that you make are learning opportunities that you then can just carry on to the next thing, right? Like, oh, I've seen this before. Oh, I've ran into this issue before. Oh, I've done this before. And having a good memory, regardless of if you write it down or you keep it in your head, or you put post-it notes all over your wall, whatever the case may be, whatever you got to do, make sure that you learn from your mistakes in the best way that is right for you, because those are the stepping stones that kind of like build you up to take the next step. Like, nobody becomes a software engineer unscathed. Nobody becomes an engineering manager unscathed, right? Everyone has their battle scars. Everyone can reminisce about how they, used to use just vanilla jQuery or just vanilla JavaScript before, React came or Vue came, or, whatever, right? Everyone has those like war stories as a software engineer. And I use war stories loosely, right? Like very loosely. We're not going to war here, but these are some of the things where I used to struggle with a lot in terms of when I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I still make a lot of mistakes, but when I made a lot of mistakes and I didn't learn from them, I just beat myself up about them. But then when you understand like, oh no, these are lessons to be learned, it's amazing. Complete mindset shift. Setting realistic expectations is something that I have been trying to do constantly and consistently. And this means setting shorter term goals and shorter term expectations for myself. So these like big giant goals don't seem as like far off, right? Because your short term and medium term goals are going to coalesce and form into those bigger goals, right? As long as you make sure those shorter term goals are on the path of you becoming whatever you want to become, right? If you want to become an engineering manager, there's obviously a path for that. If you want to just become a senior software engineer, there is a path for that, because there is a difference between senior software engineers and engineering managers. Like my engineering manager right now, he currently barely gets to do any coding because he's like in meetings, he's, you know, scheduling things, he's, you know, speaking to users sometimes. But, you know, senior software engineers are, you know, still in the trenches, they're still, you know, working and everything. So there's different dynamics for different positions. And I think it's really important to set your goals and expectations towards those things, right? Not necessarily like, you know, if I don't become a senior engineer by this time, then I'm a failure, but more so, I'm going to learn how to be a better communicator. I'm going to do these things to become a better communicator. I am going to learn TypeScript. Here are the steps that I'm going to take to learn TypeScript. I'm going to learn Next.js. Here are the steps that I'm going to take to learn Next.js. All of those really, really important skills that you think you need to get to the next level, break those down. Try to understand what's possible and what's realistic for you, given your time, given, you know, all of the real life things that are happening around you, because obviously, you know, we are not just isolated when we're coding, right? There's things that happen. You get phone calls, you get pings, you get this, you get that. Understand that that's completely fine, and you can, you know, level set as often as you want. You don't have to put 3 hours in because you said you were going to put 3 hours in. You can put 2.5 hours in, you can put an hour in. Doesn't matter, as long as you're taking steps towards that goal and you're being kind to yourself on the way. So last section, dealing with adversity and imposter syndrome. So I'm still dealing with imposter syndrome. You are still dealing with imposter syndrome. My engineering manager, all of my founders are dealing with imposter syndrome. Trust me, I speak to all of them almost every day. It's something that's ubiquitous in tech, but I don't think it's necessarily really dealt with head on, because it kind of seems like, oh, it just exists, so we just deal with it, right? I don't think you should just deal with it and let it happen. I feel like you can fight it, you can combat it. Obviously you can't, it can't ever go away, but there are things that you can do to lessen the effect of, you know, when it does come and when it does happen, you're just like, oh, I know who you are, imposter syndrome. Like it's fine. I'm just gonna keep doing my job. I'm just gonna keep working. Like this is something that I've experienced before, and it's a feeling that I'll feel again. And it just needs to not necessarily irritate you, but kind of like pass over you. So what is imposter syndrome? So it's, how I usually explain it is that it's a thought pattern in which a person doubts their skills, they doubt their talents, they doubt their accomplishments, and they have a fear that they're not enough, or they have a fear that they're being a fraud because they've run into some obstacle that was, you know, insurmountable, or they thought was insurmountable, or they ran into some issue that was outside of their expertise. And so that makes them feel like, oh, you know, in this case, oh, I'm not meant to be a software engineer, or I'm not smart enough to tackle this problem, which is completely false. You are a software engineer and you are smart enough to tackle this problem. It's just you haven't had the necessary experience to solve that problem yet. But the experience you gain is by troubleshooting, by trial and error. That's how you learn. That's how you become a better software engineer. It's trial and error. So where does it come from? It comes from everywhere. There's not, specific trigger that happens, right? It can come from not being able to solve a bug. It can come from you, speaking to a colleague that works at a different company that, has progressed faster than you have. It can come from, you talking to somebody that's in a completely different field, but they've been doing well for themselves, and you're just getting started in software engineering, and you feel like, oh, I'm not going to be as successful as you. Or it can come from comparing yourself to other people, right? Imposter syndrome can come from a number of places, but it's something that can definitely be handled, and it's something that can become a tool rather than a hindrance. So how can you combat it? You can combat it by taking time. And I know that's kind of like it kind of like pops the balloon of like, oh, I thought I was going to have this like neat little trick to get rid of imposter syndrome. No, there is no, fix for imposter syndrome. It's just giving yourself time and understanding that you are on this journey in order to become better. And through that journey, you will experience so many ups and downs. And the path from, where you are right now to where you want to be is just through it. You can't go around it. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. You have to get through it. You have to make those mistakes, and you have to face those mistakes head on, right? It can be hard to reach out for help when you've been, fighting a bug for like a day or 2 days, right? Reaching out to somebody, especially if you've been doing it for the past like week straight, right? I remember, I think this was like the first 2 weeks of my current job at a startup. Things were moving so fast. Things still are moving super fast, but things were moving so fast for me where I was like, oh my God, where do I find this? Where do I find that? How do I do this? How do I do that? And it was also a new language, right? And it was a new framework. So I was just kind of like really, really not necessarily in over my head, but I was drinking from a fire hose, right? And that can get unwieldy. And I experienced a lot of imposter syndrome within that first like month, but thankfully I was around, or I have a team around me that, has been in that position and has given me great advice in terms of saying like, hey, the only way is through it. You can only go through it. There's no way to go around it. If you sit there and don't reach out for help, you're not going to get any better. If you don't ping everyone in the engineering channel and the Slack channel, you're not going to get better. If you don't post, what you've tried before, if you're not, vocal about how you solved a problem, you're not going to get any help, right? And that's the only way that you can get better, is learning from people who have done this stuff before. That's how anyone gets better, is by learning, is by making those mistakes. And a good way of, learning all of this quickly, I guess, without kind of the whole getting advice from more senior colleagues, is putting your journey into perspective. Like, understand that you are where you need to be on your journey. You can't look at somebody else's journey. You can't look at another lane and see them going a different speed. You are going on your own lane. You can't get in their lane. That's traffic. You don't want to get in traffic. Traffic's bad. You have your own lane and it's cleared for you. Like, your journey is your journey, and the mistakes that you make and the lessons that you learn are building your own path for your own career, right? You can't adapt somebody else's career. I mean, obviously there's a software engineering career, but everyone else has their story about like how they got into software engineering, or how they got into cybersecurity, or how they got to VP, or how they got to senior software engineer, or how they got to engineering lead, or how they got to this or to that, right? You are going to have your own story. And if it mirrors somebody else's story super closely because you were worried about them, honestly, that's pretty boring. Like, you don't want your story to be reminiscent of somebody else's, right? You want your story to have memories of you overcoming adversity in your own way, in your own fashion, because that just gives more credence to you being a software engineer, right? Like, that's your evidence of how good you've become over time. So how can you keep the momentum going? I like to say discipline over motivation, and I'm not knocking motivation in any way, shape, or form. I think motivation is great. I think Nike ads are amazing. Like as soon as I get finished seeing one, I want to go outside and like run 2 miles, right? But motivation is fleeting. It doesn't last forever. It's a probably not using this word correctly, but it's like a dopamine hit. It's temporary. It's something that brings you up and then you go right back down afterward and you want to sit on the couch and chill after a long day at work, right? You can't motivation is not a long-term sustainable thing that you can depend on. Discipline, however, is completely different. Discipline is emotionless. Discipline is consistent. Discipline is everything that you want in order to become better over time, right? Discipline is the thing that you lean on when you aren't motivated. Discipline is the thing that you lean on when you aren't so gung-ho about work the next day, but you gotta go because you're getting paid for it, right? Discipline is understanding things from a long-term perspective. It's knowing that if you stay on the path, if you keep going, if you work through obstacles, if you work through adversity, you are going to get to where you want to go. But motivation is going to put you in a spot where you think, oh my God, I can solve everything at any time. Then you run into a bug and the bug just completely destroys your motivation because it's so fragile. It's something that doesn't necessarily stick with you through thick and thin, but discipline definitely will. And reflect back on all of your progress, right? You know, your obstacles are in the past. You're still here. You're still somebody who's learning. You're still somebody who has been left standing. A lot of people will spend like a year trying to learn software engineering and then they quit. Unfortunately, it happens because they, get impatient because they're not learning quickly enough, or they think that, because they're running into a lot of bugs, they're not good enough, they're not solving problems quick enough. But that's not true at all. It's just that they haven't put enough time into understanding what they need to become a software engineer professionally. And this is, this is not a knock on people's intelligence or anything. I think it's more so a patience thing. I don't think it has anything to do with intellect, in my opinion. I think it's more so to do with patience, because I think the longer that you put work into something, the longer that you create those kind of like mental cues and habits to where, typing up an Express server in Node is like super easy. You can do that super quickly. Whipping up a quick, React app is like super easy now, or, creating a component or creating a custom hook is like super easy now because you've done it so many times. It's the repetition. It's the all the accumulated mistakes up until this point has like made you into somebody who actually, can create an application in a way shorter amount of time than you used to when you were just starting out, right? So please try to reflect back on all your progress, create like a mental highlight tape in your head and run that over and over and over again until you're sick in the stomach, because honestly, that's what's going to keep you going. That's what's going to keep you from, bumping up into a really big obstacle and like turning around and saying, I don't want to do this anymore, when like right behind that obstacle was your job, or right behind that obstacle was that promotion, or right behind that obstacle was everything you've wanted in software engineering, right? It's making it past those obstacles that really gets you to the point of, validating yourself. And I think that's super awesome. So that wraps it up for the talk. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope I didn't ramble on too long, because I have a habit of that. My coworkers have told me that I have a habit of rambling on, but hopefully that wasn't too bad. So.
Oh no, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I appreciate it. I know it's almost 9 now. Would you have another like 10 minutes to stay and answer any questions if people wanted to do like a Q&A? I'm more than happy to stay on. So yeah, I'm super appreciative of that. And if anyone wants to stay or just like maybe post it, everyone in the chat is really appreciating it. If you want to post a question, either unmute yourself, or if you want to ask in the chat, either one. And yeah, we can do like a 10-minute Q&A. If people have questions.
Yeah, open to all questions, technical or non-technical.
The first question in the chat is, where can we get your book? So maybe if you want to post a link in the chat.
Sure, let me grab that really quickly. I don't have it pulled up. I probably should have had it pulled up, huh?
Oh. There's another cat.
Okay, I will post it right here.
Okay.
Here we go.
That's
You grab it on Amazon. Yep.
And I can also post it in the meetup comments for anyone who left early. Yeah.
Oh, and thank you, Eldred. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was my first time and I'm super nervous and I probably shouldn't have worn this flannel because I'm sweating right now, but.
It's the beauty of you being in your own room, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Can't really see. All right, I'm gonna post this. Does anyone have any other questions? I know you're getting a lot of feedback of just affirmative feedback of the presentation and the talk.
I'm gonna put in my because I know it wasn't, I put it up super quick, but that's my Twitter handle. If you all have any questions, my DMs are open. You know, I'm not saying follow me, but if you do have questions, send me a DM. I'd be happy to answer, talk with you all more. I love doing this. I love speaking to people who are either in their like first year of software engineering or like looking for their job. Because I remember being in that same situation not too long ago, and I remember it being super hard and challenging, and you know, sometimes super discouraging for sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I am finishing a boot camp right now, but I just keep like imagining some of the scenarios that you talked about. You gave some really good advice in my first job and trying to do the best I can. Anyway, and a lot of it seems to come down to note taking and being organized with your note taking, whether it's on paper or Notion seems complex, but I should probably learn it. But like, I think the key is whether you're taking notes in a stand-up or a meeting, or just, you know, you're pairing with someone because you're having an, you know, some sort of problem. You don't want to ask the same question over and over. So you want to be able to find, you're probably learning new things every day, right? And so after a few months, like, it's really important to have been organized, not just in how you took the notes, but how to retrieve that information. I was just wondering if you had any tips on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So confession, I do use Notion because Notion is, it's a really good, the way that they've created that application, it's really good to search things. I think being able to have all of the pages indexed in a way where you can just like hotkey Command K and like type in words that you remembered from like a year ago, it'll be able to pull that up for you. So if you're gonna stick with one note-taking application, I would say definitely Notion. And on YouTube, there are a good amount of resources in terms of, you know, an introduction into learning Notion, just kind of like organizing your thoughts. The flexibility of Notion is a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because you can do so many different things with Notion, but I think a lot of the base level functionality is as much as you'll need, because you're able to organize things in pages, you're able to, you know, build a hierarchy of things. So if you want to separate things by, you know, back end, front end notes, or, you know, I guess if you're using multiple languages, JavaScript, Python notes, or, you know, whatever it may be, you can do that with Notion. So I heavily advise putting a lot of time into understanding Notion, because they're doing a lot. They just actually came out with their API. I think it might still be in beta, but I'm not sure. But they're doing a lot in the space of note taking and organization. So yeah, definitely keep on that intuition of like needing to use or wanting to use Notion and wanting to learn it, because I think that's going to pay off in the long run for sure.
That's great. Thank you.
So someone asked, what steps did I take to get a firm grasp of the fundamentals? So for the fundamentals, actually, I'll do this for Ruby, because currently the job that I'm at, our application is built in Ruby on Rails. And so we use Ruby. We use a little bit of JavaScript for some of the front end stuff that Ruby on Rails has a hard time handling. So some of the Ajax requests, we use JavaScript for that, but we mostly use Ruby. So how I learned Ruby was building small, compact projects. So I know a lot of people learn languages by building full stack applications. And I can see that pipeline of going from a boot camp, building a full stack application, because they're getting you ready for a job, right? But I was in a different position where I had a job, but I was interviewing for another job, right? So if I didn't get that other job, I mean, obviously I would be super sad because I love where I'm at right now, but I didn't necessarily have to build something amazing to show off my portfolio because I had all of that experience from a previous job, right? So I'm a little bit in a different position, but how I learned the fundamentals for Ruby is that I built a couple web scrapers actually in Ruby, all in Ruby. And I remember scraping Stack Overflow for their jobs list, right? So I built a web scraper that scraped Stack Overflow's jobs. And I remember troubleshooting so quickly that I got IP banned for an entire day by Stack Overflow because I kept scraping their site over and over and over again. So don't troubleshoot that way. If you're gonna build a web scraper, you might get IP banned. But building little projects like those where you learn about the really important things like traversing arrays, manipulating strings, API calls, and things like that, where you're going to be using those on a day-to-day basis, right? Like modularizing the different aspects of the bigger job that you're going to be taking is like really important. And it's less intimidating than building a full stack app where you have to worry about all these different features and all these different things that you have to build at once, right? Doing something step by step in a small, compact way can really help solidify those skills and do it multiple times. Like I didn't just build a web scraper for Stack Overflow. I built a web scraper for I think it was, I built a web scraper for GameStop, and then I built a web scraper for NFL.com. So that the reason why I built multiple ones is because traversing the DOM, obviously, you know, there are different ways that these websites are built. So like traversing the DOM and selecting different elements was a main reason why I built multiple web scrapers, because not all websites are the same, right? So being able to kind of think through, okay, how am I going to scrape this specific website was super helpful as well in order to think about like string manipulation, arrays, and those like really basic, you know, data structures. Because I mean, obviously getting those fundamentals are super important. So I hope I answered that question. I haven't heard of Big Sheet, but yeah, actually I haven't heard of Big Sheet. There was one note-taking app that I really liked that somebody had sent to me, but I completely forgot the name of it. But if I find out, I will send it to you, Rachel, and hopefully you can send it out to everyone else.
I think that what they were talking about is, and I know Brittany was, I think maybe at this talk I was this idea of like creating, not necessarily on a note-taking app, but creating your own like brag sheet. So like anytime someone gives you anything you accomplish, or maybe you're in a meeting and you get some, that you just like keep a list going of everything that you've done. So then when you're both on like performance reviews or one-on-ones or anything, you have kind of a list of all your accomplishments. And then it's also something that you can bring to interviews and resumes, but like just going back to the, and something you could put on Notion, but this idea of kind of constantly taking notes and refining your notes, it could also be something that anything positive, and it can help you combat imposter syndrome, but all this stuff about like brag sheets.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Put your highlight tape on a poster somewhere, put it on a dry erase board, like write it down somewhere where it's like super visible to you, right? Because it's super important to understand where you have been and where you are and where you're going. It helps connect everything. Like it helps to create a sense of just kind of togetherness of your career, because sometimes you can get so lost in like the present, and when you're like dealing with something super difficult, you don't think that you're capable of solving a problem, but you've probably dealt with something way harder before, right? you just haven't necessarily thought back to it because you're dealing with this thing right now. But being able to remind yourself that you are capable and you can do it is super important to getting past any obstacle, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Any last question before we wrap this up, either in the chat or just unmute yourself? I'm going to take that as a no. Thank you so much, Wellington. This was wonderful. That was a great presentation, packed full of so many different information. Really excited to have this talk. Like I said, I'll be posting it on YouTube, and I'll give everyone a link in the meetup group, and then we'll also be posting it to our website where we have all our tech talks. And yeah, I'm so happy you could be a part of this, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you all.